All right.
I guess I can get started. Um,
Go
hey
ahead.
everyone, thanks for joining in. Um, we're gonna get started with doing a little bit of intro, a little bit of information about us, and how we like where we are, who we are, what we like, how we feel about Nevus, what we've done with our own. Um, so I'll get started myself. My name is Amann Islam. I currently live in Austin, Texas. I was born and raised in Katy, Texas, just west of Houston. Um, I work in the tech industry as a software qualification engineer, and I work remotely, so I have a lot of flexibility with that. What I do with the Nevus organization right now is that I work with Matt, Lilly, and a few other people, including Stephanie, who's in the audience with you guys now, with social media. And whenever I'm at conferences, I try to participate as one of the, I guess, like elder Nevus owners, and making sure people can feel welcome, and like the kids have someone to watch them. So that's how I do that. I have a large nevus on my chest and a crap ton of satellite nevuses everywhere else. And for the most part, it doesn't really bother me, except that it exists. Like with the chest nevus, and I'm sure Matt and Lily can say that it's much thinner, so impact from anything is more impactful. I have not really done anything with my nevus until recently. I had a couple removed on my scalp. That was fine for me. A little bit of a tiny bald spot where the incision was, but other than that, it's okay. Would I recommend it? It kind of just depends how impactful, like how large the mole is, or like, if it's medically necessary. So, if you're an elder or an adult, and that's up to you. As a kid, I would probably leave it as like a medical decision. Um, and that's it about me. I'll pass it over to Matt or Lily.
Okay, I'll go. So yeah, my name's Lily. I'm from the Seattle area, but I live in Philadelphia right now. I work in healthcare. I'm on the whole med school track right now. And I work on the awareness committees and the research committee for Nevus Outreach, and also I'm helping plan the virtual conference for this summer. I was born with a giant back nevus, and I had 12 surgeries to remove most of it, and then also the small satellites everywhere. I haven't had major complications. Of course, when you have 12 surgeries, that comes with its own thing, with being exposed to antibiotics as a kid and tightness from where the surgeries were. I think most of my impacts were more psychological, which we'd be happy to discuss later. Would I recommend it? I think that's a difficult question that I'd be happy to discuss later. It's difficult in that given the opportunity, I probably wouldn't have done the same thing, but that's because our knowledge of nevi and CMN was very different at the time. I had the surgeries because they thought I would get melanoma, and now we know that's not true. So I think people are very lucky now, just because we know so much more and can make more educated medical decisions now.
All right, and I am Matthew Rogers. I am a 26-year-old, currently living in the Kansas City, Missouri area, and I'm originally from Fort Worth, Texas. I have been involved with Nevus Outreach since its inception in 1998. Been lucky to have a strong extended family through the organization, and I have been recently in 2018 joined the in 2020 joined the Nevus Outreach board, and I am the chair of the awareness committee. Lily and Amann are incredibly helpful on that committee as well. I'm a Cape Nevus owner, and the Cape Nevus goes up the back of my neck and about 3/4 of the way down my back, and I have large nevi all over my body, as well as many satellite nevi. I personally have not had too many complications from my nevus, other than overheating here and there and general sensitivity. And as far as any treatment for surgery, hair removal, things like that, I also have not had that. Although recently I actually had a biopsy done on a mole in my back in my last dermatologist appointment. So is benign, so we're good. But that's the closest thing to a surgery I've had recently. So as far as recommendations are concerned, I can't speak incredibly intelligently on the surgeries that I haven't had, but I'd be happy to discuss further as the questions come in. And that's the part I wanted to touch on too. This is a Q&A session, so we have a list of questions we're going to be working with that we will refer back to. And we have a couple that we want to discuss just to give you guys some context. However, if you have any questions at all, please send them in the Q&A and we will try to answer those. We'll try to prioritize those as we can. So
yeah, and nothing's off limits. You can ask anything. We're here to kind of share our own experience to try to help you guys figure out what this rare disease really is.
Mm-hmm. Appreciate you all jumping on for to help us celebrate Rare Disease Day. So Amann, would you take the next question?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, just trying to think about how to answer this one.
We could have one of us go first too, if that's easier.
No, that's not it. I'm just thinking like this question has like, I'll read it out for everyone else so they have what the question is. And I guess we'll all give a stab at it. I'll just go first for this one. It's how has your nevus impacted you socially, psychologically, and professionally? So that's like 4 questions. For the most part, I mean, chronologically speaking, I would say the biggest impact was when I was like younger. But it seemed self-contained from ages like 5 to 7 or 8 predominantly for me, where I got like name calls and so like slight bullying. But that didn't happen throughout the day. It was just like literally on the bus like a few times a week. So compared to like other people's experiences, maybe I haven't really had a lot of like negative impact from the outside world that's like overt. Like maybe there's like people who would avoid me or, you know, think or treat me differently, but it's not to the extent that I would recognize it. So for the most part, I've been okay. You know, once I got older and started thinking about dating and you know, finding a partner and things like that, that, you know, was a concern, especially the rise of dating apps, and you have to, you know, photos are basically what they're going off of, and you know, when you have an obvious condition outside the norm, that's like a negative impact on your quote score. So that was like something I have to like consider, but it's not like a daily thought either. So I think whether actively or passively, I've been pretty lucky to not really be impacted by it. It just kind of exists, and I think for the rest of us, it's like pretty true that we've normalized it within ourselves and our communities that we've built. Professionally, I think there's like no impact at all. I'm in tech; they don't care, so I'm good there. Anything else? Yeah, I think Nevus has, you know, not impacted me too much socially, but it's just like something I have to deal with personally, just like medically, really, for the most part, yeah.
I think for me, I view it as kind of twofold. There's the medical side of it, and then there's the physical difference part of it. I think for me, both of those, like learning to deal with that, have honestly been difficult. With the medical part, since I had a surgery every year until I was 13, it was a lot. I loved it as a kid, and I think a lot of kids who you talk to kind of enjoy it because you get presents and fun food and things. But by the time I was a teenager and getting surgeries, I wasn't the biggest fan, just because I had to miss basketball practice and miss a week of school and everything like that. So yeah, medically, I was learning how to deal with a lot of trauma and questions to my parents about, why did you make me do this? And then the physical difference part of thing has also been hard. Of course, not too bad, and you learn to deal with it. But I think one thing is it can be really fine for a lot of people. Amann and Matt interviewed a long-time Nevus Outreach member, Rita, a few weeks ago, and she was actually saying something that I thought was interesting, where she said the people with the more visible nevi are generally the ones who are very well adjusted because they have to face it every day and they learn very early how to handle it. But the people with the ones that are a little more hidden, who had surgeries or it's on their arm or whatever, are the ones who struggle a little more just because they haven't fully learned how to confront it and how to live with it. I think that's really interesting. It just shows that it's a case by case basis. Some people are great and they love it, and some people are still kind of working through it. So it just really depends on the person. I think professionally, it's almost been good for me since I work in healthcare. People see that I have a passion and they understand, and they kind of just give me props for going through it. So it's kind of a bonus, I guess. It's been a lot of great material for med school interviews. Matt.
Yeah, that's a great point. I actually wanted to kind of echo the visible difference side of it too that you mentioned, Lily. Like since my time being involved in Nevus Outreach, that is something that's kind of shocked me too. I feel pretty well adjusted socially, and I think that's a lot down to my upbringing, but also because it's very difficult to hide mine. Like it's very visible for everybody to see. In that way, growing up, I would say I was bullied just like other kids were. Mine were a little bit, more targeted, a little bit easier. It's a little easier target when you got a Nevus, I would say. But yeah, like other than that, I always was able to find groups, close friends that would be supportive. And I think one of the most impactful things that helped me get well adjusted from a young age was my family treated me as if I was just like any other kid for the most part, and so much so that I nowadays, despite even like from a medical perspective, needing to keep an eye on my nevus, I can forget I have it for periods of time. I'll go through and any failures I have in life, any successes I have in life, I don't really associate with my nevus as a result. It's just another characteristic that I have. So it's not always on my mind, and I think it's mainly because my parents from a young age and my whole family from a young age were very they wanted me to take care of myself, but they also didn't treat me like I was different all the time. Personally, that's made all the difference for me. And I think that really has driven a lot of my social impacts from my Nevus. Psychologically, I will say there have been like a couple of difficult things to kind of get through, echoing what Amann was saying, going into the dating world and stuff like that. It can be difficult. And I can speak more about that later because I think we have potential questions lined up for ourselves if we need to talk about that. And I'll say professionally as well in my industry as an engineer, it doesn't impact me at all. Turns out, at least in like tech and engineering fields, people definitely care what you can do more than how you look doing it. So I'm grateful for that. Overall, I would say my Nevus has impacted me positively more so than negatively. It gives me a platform to impact positive change. Hence why I'm involved with Nevus Outreach, and it's an honor to do so.
Awesome.
Yeah, Lily, do you want to go with the next one?
Yeah, so the first question we have is, what is the best advice to give a little boy or little girl about having a Nevus? Either of you want to jump on that?
Oh man. Amann, you have something off the top of your head?
I'm going to give the cop-out initial answer of it depends.
That's an awful answer.
I didn't say that was my entire answer. I just said, it does depend though. Because like some like what is there, if it's the kid asking the question, it's like that's one thing, right? Because they'll probably know like will it turn into something else, or am I special, or like does it get worse or better? So like, but parents will probably come at it from like, is my kid going to be okay? Like all in all. So like the kid is asking it, that's why it's a little hard for me. But I mean, I guess the only thing I think the only thing that really impacts us on the regular would be like psychologically, because most of the time, like our nevus is pretty benign. So given that, it's just that, you know, make sure you have like a close group of friends that you stay like in good touch with and good standing with your family. Like as long as you have that, you can pretty much get through everything. And if that for some reason has issues, like there's nothing wrong with you as an individual as long as you work on like your character and being better as a person, because all it is just skin. So it doesn't really mean anything. It's just skin. So if that's like a strong psychological like pain point, I guess it's just like kind of a daily practice of like logically speaking, like what makes me different from another person? Like not really much. My skin just looks a little different.
I think it's important for parents to be able to have open conversations about what a nevus is and how their child is feeling, because it is possible for kids to be feeling a lot that parents aren't aware of. So that's why I always recommend counseling or therapy for kids, just in case, because some kids like me just kind of bundle it up inside and their parents have no idea what's going on in their head until it just explodes 20 years later. But I think the vast majority of kids are fine. And even if they're not fine, they will be fine. I think we all know that people with a nevus are resilient and they're strong. And it might be hard, but they'll figure out how to navigate it. And I think it's important to explain to them why it's good, why it's helping them, and how it'll help them in the future, because they will learn really valuable skills just by learning how to live with it. And then also, like, I don't think parents need to talk about the whole melanoma thing or the complication thing until they're much older. I think at first it should just be about mental health and whether they should have it removed.
Yeah, I agree, Lily and Amann. Like those are great points too. I've been reflecting on this a little bit. Thankfully, I had a little extra time since you guys answered first. Appreciate that. I would say, I think a little boy or a little girl with a nevus is going to be far more concerned about how they're interacting socially than how they are medically. I feel like for the most part, parents and loved ones, guardians help take care of that part the most. And at least at a young age, I agree with both Amann and Lily. I think as a parent, you want to know that they're okay. And I think the most important thing is to assess and also to help their mental health through open communication, things like that. I guess speaking from experience, I would say the most important piece of advice that I could give to a young nevus owner is to find your crowd wherever you go. Sometimes when we look different, we don't really know where our place is. And that can be pretty jarring for a kid. I think one thing that my parents did that really helped me was they allowed me to pursue things that I wanted to, within reason, of course, just like any parent would. And it was never tied to, I'm sure it was never tied to my nevus. I'm sure they had reservations, things that they were thinking about in the background, but for the most part, I knew first and foremost, they supported me and they were communicating with me. Whether I communicate with them is another thing entirely. As Lily recommends, child therapy can be a great source, can be a great, help for that too. Again, kids don't always speak clearly to their parents. And to be honest, that is going to be tough to change. But I would say first and foremost, the most important piece of advice I could give a kid is to find your role, find your crowd. Wherever you go, if you are doing things that you enjoy, if you're finding that you have an impact, that will be the main focus, and the people around you will see you for that rather than the visible difference that you feel you have. And I found, at least in most circumstances, when I do that, for example, I've been a soccer player for my entire life. I have teammates that I've played with for years that never asked about my nevus. And I remember bringing it up sometime, and I think they're like, oh, cool. Nice. Like, it was nothing of note. And I think I had some anxiety with that growing up. Like, I kind of thought every interaction, when am I going to get asked about it? Like, how am I going to have that conversation, whatnot? And at least from what I've found, when you're around people that are like-minded and value you for you, it just kind of happens organically. So I would say, first and foremost, find your crowd, figure out what you're passionate about, and things tend to play out well after that. And obviously, keeping an open bit of communication between parent and child, great too.
Yeah, I agree. Like when I was growing up, I never had any issues about comments or bullying or any of that. It might have been because I grew up in such a small town, everyone was used to it, but it was really fine. It was more the internal, like self-esteem. How do I date people and have this conversation with them? And then like the random remarks from strangers on the street sometimes that were a little more challenging. I think, do you two have any advice that you would give yourself as a child or a teenager?
Amann, what do you got?
Matt, this is a common strategy, I'm saying. Uh, uh, I don't know if I have anything too much Nevus related. Like, I think the common theme that we brought up here is, have a strong community. Um, have people around you who accept you regardless, and then you them. And so because of that, I never really had anything to say to myself or thought about myself, like about my Nevus. It's just like something I have. I was like medically like aware of like my situation, that like I have some percentage chance of higher chance than others of skin disease, generically speaking. So like I would look at myself just to see if I was good, just dermatologist talk, parent talk. Advice though, just regular would be, better to get started early than wait. Keep yourself in good health, talk more with your friends or family than less, and sleep more. Those are probably the four most important ones that I would tell myself. But yeah, Nevus related, not so much. Maybe it's like if I had like was a hypochondriac about it, maybe I'll tell them check yourself less. But no, I was pretty laissez-faire. Yeah, that's it for me.
I think I would just tell myself I would force myself to learn how to talk about it. Like I said, I kind of just kept it all contained for most of my childhood, and that's just not the way to do it. You need to be able to talk to your parents about any side effects you're noticing, or letting your friends know what it is, because you do need to have those conversations eventually, and they're important skills to learn.
Agreed. Yeah, it's nice to, like, I guess in hindsight, having some advice I would give myself is to develop a relationship with my Nevus earlier than I did. I would say, to be able to have those kind of conversations and not have so much anxiety about them. It's just like anything else, right? If you have an elevator pitch about what, like, your resume, and you're pitching yourself to a job, you get a lot more comfortable the more practice you get. So I guess in hindsight, if I had been a little more open to having a relationship like that with my Nevus and being able to talk about it, probably could have saved some unnecessary stress and anxiety. And something else that I thought of, I think I have also, in my time growing up, stored a lot of emotions regarding my Nevus around, like, up inside, and it has been difficult to discuss with people over time. And I'm thinking of one specific event, not like I was going to discuss it with this person, but just I remember one particular comment that set me off during like a soccer game. I was going at it against this other guy who was the captain of his team, and I was a captain of mine. So I felt like there was a level playing field there, and I think I got into him a little bit too hard in a challenge, and he just like said some sort of derogatory comment about my Nevus, like in the middle of a soccer field, and it completely floored me. Like, it took me out of the game and got me into my head. And in that situation, I think people can be very reactive. I think he was just upset that I was all over him, and that was the easiest thing that he could point out was different about me. Some advice I would give myself in that situation is to take myself just like a little bit less seriously and understand where other people are coming from too. Because to be fair, his issue really wasn't with my Nevus; it was with the way I was playing. And I think sometimes as I've grown up, I've taken myself a little seriously when it comes to like protecting the idea of my Nevus all the time. Sometimes it's okay to have a laugh about it, and understanding that I think sometimes psychologically I took my Nevus more seriously than it deserved, you know.
I think
So
that's a good point that like when people make comments or ask about it, it's almost always just from a point of general curiosity and they're trying to learn, and it's rarely meant in a rude way. But that kind of gets to the next question: how do you deal with strangers staring or when they ask to touch it? I'll go first. I think comments from strangers, at least in my experience, are rare. They've only happened a few times, at least the bad ones. But when they're not fun comments, then they can stick with you. Yeah, like Matt's, one time I was like at the shopping mall with two friends that I was really trying to get in with because I thought they were so cool. And somebody said I looked like a leopard just in the middle of the aisle. And it's really hard as like a 16-year-old girl to just hear that, not expecting it. And like the lady wasn't trying to be mean. I think she probably thought it was cool, but at that time I didn't think it was cool. So my advice for that would be to just have almost like elevator pitch almost ready, just being like, this is a birthmark, or just a little thing to explain what it is. So then if you do have a negative experience, you can just recite it and be done and deal with how you're feeling. And it lets your anger not really come out, or your emotions. You can just say the little phrase and be done with it and walk away. I don't know about either of you two.
I think with strangers, like, hopefully I'm in a place or a mental space where I can like answer from like a educational standpoint, especially if they're like, polite about it, or we had some sort of conversation prior. It's not like abruptly, come up to you like, yo, what's that? Or if they do that, it's like kind of in a funny way, like, but whatever, I digress. So yeah, I think it really just depends how I'm like like how polite they are about it, and like what mental state I'm in at that moment, where it's like if it really caught me off guard, rather. Touching, I've never asked anyone if they could touch it, like maybe once. I'm just like, it's like thinner than regular skin. If like a friend, like, what Matt was saying, or like teammates or whatever, were to like bring it up, it's like, oh, I'm surprised it took you this long kind of thing. So it's like that's kind of like a safe space of sorts. So it's like not as bad. But then like what he was saying as well, it's like if someone does bring it up, it's usually not, it's like about it's about something else. And so, it's just about what's mental state you're in and how polite they are, I think, generally speaking. Matt, I don't know if you have any other comments.
yeah, something else kind of came to mind, and I guess this question depends on the perspective being like from which it's asked. If this is a parent asking, what do you do when your child is being stared at, or a stranger wants to come up to try to touch it, I think the answer is different than if we're speaking to the Nevus owner. I'll touch on the Nevus owner part first, because I feel like I can speak to that better. I over time have it's gotten a lot easier to talk about it. Again, the advice I was going to give myself from a younger age was to have a better relationship with my Nevus. And I think if you do that from a young age, it gets way easier to talk about. And again, you're able to take yourself a little less seriously when somebody makes a comment like that. You can approach it kind of in a calm manner and say, hey, I can tell from their body language and the context that they are genuinely curious, or that they're rude and they should be ignored. Like I feel like that ability to discern is built up over time. So I would say if somebody came up to this on the street right now and asked me, like out of genuine curiosity, about my nevus and then tried to attempt to touch it, I might just step away and be like, sorry, I don't like being touched, but I'll explain to you what it is if you want. Like I would try to reach them at the level that I feel like they're actually trying to be reached. Because again, there are people in the world that just see something and make a comment and they can't help themselves. They just do it. I think the important thing to keep in mind, which I think Amann and Lilly both have touched on, is that it speaks more about the person themselves than the nevus owner when that happens. And making sure that whoever it is understands that it has more to do with the other person than the nevus owner, it gets a little bit easier to handle those kind of situations. Now, I will say one thing that I've talked to my family personally about was their reaction to when strangers are staring and things like that. I've kind of always had this, as I've built up my relationship with my nevus, as I've gotten older, I've tried to have a more caring and kind of open form of communication between people that are actually curious, and I actually kind of look for it. If it's around, I'm happy to explain. But from a young age, my parents and my sibling, people in my family would do a lot of glares if they found people staring without noticing, without me noticing. And to be honest, that's how it happened most of the time. I'd be in the mall or I'd be at, I don't know, a restaurant or something, and they would catch somebody's eyes staring at me for a little longer than they felt was appropriate, and they would shoot them a glare back. And occasionally I caught them doing it, and I was like, I told them essentially that that's not really the message that I want to spread, you know. And I know that's kind of a difficult thing, especially it can be a difficult thing for parents, especially like I love my family and they're incredibly protective over me, and I love that they do that for me. Um, but I would say I in some ways I wish they were a bit more open. Like I wish that I could have embodied like being open more and push that onto them too, because that's how awareness actually gets spread. That's how outreach works. You know, people see something they don't notice and sorry they don't understand, and if they approach it with genuine curiosity, I feel like they deserve to be given an explanation, given the proper conditions. Right? If you're on a good day and you're willing to explain it. There was one time actually I can speak on that someone touched my nevus and I kind of allowed them to. It was one of my sister's friends in like middle school. She's like, "Whoa, it's like you're like your neck is just it looks like fur." And I was like, "Cool, yeah, you can touch it." I felt like I was a pretty cool kid. So that to get a little bit of attention was nice in that situation. But for the most part, if someone, for example, remarks on my nevus and I'm like explaining things about it and I actually get to talk to them about it, I'll occasionally be like, hey, yeah, you can touch it real fast. You can feel it. It doesn't have any sweat glands. So it actually just sits here and feels like a heating pad. I would say I'm pretty open to that. And I think to close the loop a little bit, um, the way that I react to that is, and the way that I deal with that essentially is I approach the situation with as much curiosity as much kindness as the other person does. If I can tell it's just a off the cuff remark that doesn't really deserve attention, I don't really give it any attention. But if there's curiosity behind it, I try not to get touched first, but I'll entertain the curiosity.
I think that's a great point you made where, like, of course, parents are going to be defensive if they hear a comment about their child, but their reaction is really important because, like, the parent's relationship with the nevus is what defines the child's relationship, especially at an early age. If the parent is understanding and open and communicative about it, the child might be too. Do either of you have a certain question you want to answer next?
I think it could be useful to go into like grooming, hygiene tips, self-esteem, and stuff like that. I think that would allow us to give some more specific examples of things we had to deal with growing up.
Mhm.
So, Aman, since we're since we're already on this, guys, if you can't tell, there's some chemistry here. We we work together regularly. So, uh, Aman, how did a puberty affect your nevus, your self-esteem, and do you have any grooming hygiene tips that you can share?
Um, for the most part, it was just in relation to, the, when I started thinking about like relationships and dating, and how the opposite sex would think about myself trying to find a partner. Um, let's see. I mean, I guess when you're going through puberty, you question everything, right? So relative to someone who didn't have Nevus, like we just had one more thing to consider, um, as something that we don't have like a base fundamental understanding, or how it will be received or work in the real world, right? We kind of found our own footing, grounding, understanding. So like it's just like one extra thing. Like from a parent to child perspective, it should be they're going through puberty. They're going to be questioning everything. They're trying to validate anything. They just have one more thing to think about than someone who doesn't have it. And for myself, like, something I did consider, but for the most part, like I kind of just, very quickly, probably when you're like 3 or 4, like you normalize it within yourself, because, you normalize anything to yourself when you're a kid because it's there. Therefore it's like you're, it's just whatever. Right. So like, one way I, you know, handled my Nevus was that like I would do like connect the dots, or like stuff like that. So I'll do play with friends and whatnot. So like I always kind of made it a small game, so I didn't think about it too much, because like I'm just gonna keep coming back to like the community thing, because like to me that's like pretty much everything. So it's like if you have like friends of like you're probably gonna be fine like finding a partner or making more friends. Like if you can't make friends, then that's like a bigger problem than like it's just usually not because we need this, because people are very like understanding and kind, like for the most part. Grooming, so there is like Nevus grows more hair, so like once I started to shave, I guess I was like, okay, well I guess I'll start shaving some of these Nevus parts that grew hair faster. I didn't really consider it before, just because no one mentions it. Maybe you should mention it to your kid if it starts looking to be very abnormal to the rest of your body. But no, I mean, when I was younger, I was like, oh, look how long this is getting. I thought it was cool. Like, it was weird to me to cut it. And then I was like, oh, grooming, that's like good to have. So then I started doing that. Let's see. I did pick at my Nevus sometimes, because kids pick at everything. I mean, that heals normally, like scabbing wise and whatever. So like, I'm just thinking about hygiene. I didn't I didn't use shampoo or conditioner on my large Nevus. It didn't have too much hair, so like I just used body wash. So I don't have too much to say there. I guess the theme of all my answers is normalize very early. I have a lot of friends, so I don't really consider a lot of problems. Or make sure you have your community around you. So that's what I have.
For me as a kid, I would always wear like these surfer swimming tops, of course for sun protection, but also just so people wouldn't see my Nevus. And then when I became a teenager, I would just wear like a t-shirt swimming, which was weird looking back, but I just didn't want anyone to see that it existed. And it was difficult in PE. I remember I was scared for like a year before PE started, because I'd have to change in front of people and they would see it. So I just got like these tank tops that hit it with my mom, and I would just plan what clothes I was wearing on PE days just to try to hide it the most I could. And I know that's probably not the healthiest thing, but it really helped me at that time figure out just how to exist. As Amann said, it grows more hair, and as a girl, that was not easy, just because of the patriarchy and views of hair growth as a woman. So I just shave everywhere. My brother had a little facial nevus, and he would use just like little scissors to cut the hair, and he eventually got it removed when he entered puberty, just because he didn't like having to deal with that. but yeah, I just kind of shave everything to deal with hair growth. And again, that might not also be the most healthy thing, but it works for me. I think with dating, if it's again visible, like a facial nevus, you don't really have a lot of issues because what people see, know what you look like, and so you don't. It's not like they're learning something new. Of course, that wasn't really the issue with me, and intimacy was its own thing to figure out. Just learning how to disclose a nevus with people who I'd barely had a couple conversations with. But you just kind of have to learn how to do it, and it's a skill that you develop, and it ultimately makes you a better communicator and have a better understanding of your relationship with your nevus.
Before Matt answers, I actually did a similar thing what Lily said, where during gym I would wear like I'd go to the shower, I would change separately. So I'm recalling that now because like I guess it's just so long ago I forgot that was the thing. But I definitely did that too when that was happening. I think like 6th, 7th grade is where I felt more insecure about it. And then around like 8th grade, like a little less so. I still was kind of doing the shirt thing. And then, 9th grade I was in band. So, I didn't have to do that anymore. So I kind of avoided high school, really just middle school for me. Now, earlier we talked about parents' relationship with your nevus is how you treat your relationship with your nevus. My dad was nervous about other people reacting to me. And so like I kind of hid it in that respect, like wearing shirts when go swimming, whatever, stuff like that. But I think one of the reasons I didn't really remember that is because I always attributed it to me. I was a fatter kid, so I just didn't like being fat. So like I still think that was the case, like 80-20. But I still that fact of the nevus was still there. And it was kind of like a 2-factor thing. So I did want to address that. I totally did that too. My previous answers did not indicate that I had any anxiety. I totally did. I was just thinking that like for the most part, like 99% of my day, it wasn't a problem. But the 1% of the times, which would be like when I'd have to like change in front of others under like more people than I wanted to share that information with or that vulnerability with, like being in PE, right? Your friends, no big deal. Your friends and people who don't like you, the people who don't like you, that's the problem. And so if you're not good at, comebacks and whatever, which I definitely was not, I wanted to avoid that. So I talked to my gym teacher at the time. He said, yeah, you can go do that. And, the adults around you should be able to help you get through that. I think the kids growing up now, there is like the concept of vulnerability and understanding and acceptance is like more ingrained in like the normalcy of like social culture. And so I don't think they'll have to deal with that as much. One of the people in our organization, named Gloria, she owns that. Like, and so, she's like 18 now, right? So I guess for that generation, they seem to be really cool with it. But when we were growing up, I think we weren't sure what that meant, like, because it was still kind of new. So I just want to add on to my previous answer. But Matt, go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's a great point too, though, Amann. The fact of the matter is we are growing, like kids nowadays are growing up in a different era than we did. I think for the most part, most people across generations can say that middle school and puberty was just the time of their lives, or said with a little sarcasm. So for me personally, there were other issues that I was going through at that point in time that weren't necessarily directly connected to my nevus, but yeah, like echoing what Amann said earlier, there's just like maybe like an extra dimension to dealing with that. Like as a guy, like when you start to have the conversation of having to wear deodorant all the time, when someone in your family says, "Hey, you need to start wearing this," like that's about kind of the time that I started realizing that like my nevus was growing a lot of hair too. I actually didn't shave. I got haircuts, of course, regularly growing up, and mine comes all the way up to like about 3/4 of the way up the back of my head. So the hair texture actually changes, and that hair gets trimmed up, as often as I would get a haircut. But my neck into my back would not. And when I was younger, just like any hair growth, it took quite a while to start. I mean, I was sitting there worried about when I was going to grow a beard or a mustache, and that took forever in and of itself. But my back hair also eventually got to the point where I needed to shave it. So I don't think I actually trimmed it until maybe like the end of high school, something like that. Since then, I periodically get help from like family members, and my mom actually. Yeah, I get help from family members. I think a couple of friends have done it too. Really kind of fun conversation to have. Asking someone to shave your back, it's a great time. But most people that, again, if you have a good community and you're surrounded by people that love you, they'll say it's no problem at all. My mom actually got me recently in the past year this kind of extension arm that allows me to shave my back myself, which I love. It's great. I can actually be independent now. So that's been incredibly helpful. And I would say like biggest grooming hygiene tips, if anyone on this call or if anybody knows someone with difficult to reach hair, definitely get one of those. I could separately send someone like the product that I have, but it's great for trimming up areas like in the lower middle back. I think at one point in time, I tried shaving my entire back without having that, and I just used like a Phillips razor that I use for like beard trimming and stuff. And I got like this 6 by like foot section in the middle of my back that I just can't get. Like it just looks like a brick of hair. So this thing helps knock all that out. And I would say like my grooming hygiene tips are more associated with hair for mine. For the most part, like at least over the rest of my body, they kind of blend into my leg hair pretty easily. So I don't really worry about that. Other grooming hygiene tips. I've got like a couple in my beard, but they just kind of exist as part of the beard. So I just treat them the same way. Once I started shaving, I would just shave over them a little more cautiously so that I wouldn't irritate the skin, as has been touched on already. Nevi are quite sensitive. So I try to be cognizant of that. Other grooming tip as well. I'm not sure if anybody has used the really fine trimmers. There's like really fine trimmers that go down to whatever, like a millimeter, half millimeter, and so on. There's ones that essentially go up against the skin. My the lady who cuts my hair, for the last 2 to 3 years, maybe, I think it's been that long, she's been using that on my neck, and the nevus hair is actually getting thinner over time, which has been great because that was the biggest problem I had growing up from like a grooming and hygiene perspective. Was just so much hair. It was always so hot. It impacted me for like soccer and just genuine living in Texas. So yeah, if you're able to, if there's areas where you feel like you grow a lot of hair, getting one of those really fine mesh trimmers that goes pretty much right up against the skin and takes it down as low as it possibly can go. At least with my nevus, I've found that the hair gets thinner over time. So if it's an area where you hope that it would get thinner and not be as prolific, then I'd recommend something like that too. All right, so we are approaching the final 10 minutes or so, guys. Is there a question that either of you were thinking from the list you'd like to touch on?
No, I just think if anyone in the audience has any questions, now would be a good time. We can transition over to Nevus Outreach.
Good call.
Yeah, but let's give the 10 minutes to the audience if you have any other questions. I mean, we've been answering them as they've been coming in, but like if you guys want to take like a minute, if there's anything like specific that you guys want to ask, or any curiosities or questions or concerns.
Yep. Yeah, we want to address those first.
And as they do or don't do that, I think that the largest fear for like parents is like fitting in. And I just think that people are, for the most part, pretty happy to take anyone in as long as they're nice and, get along with others. So I think the world is a nicer place than sometimes we remember it can be or think it could be. And, you know, as long as they're taking care of themselves, and they'll be okay, like for the most part. It's not a super big deal as like a person. Like, the only issue would be like, I think the largest issue would be like probably medically. And that's not really an issue. Most of the time it's benign. So, and that's like long term. In the moment, it definitely sucks when you're like a kid. That's for sure. But like everything sucks when you're a kid because you don't know what anything means, right? You're still trying to figure it out. So I guess give them a moment to breathe about that and complain about it and listen to them. Or act, you know, they'll probably hide it from you, but if you could find a way to ask around it, that's definitely a way. Would you have wanted your parents to ask you if you wanted surgery? I'll start with that because that seems to be the trend. So my parents did ask me if I wanted surgery when I was a kid. And I said no, because going back to my previous answers, I've normalized it. It's like it kind of just owned it, I accepted it. It was like, this is just a part of me. So I didn't really question like getting surgery. I'm glad. I think it's good to ask. Like if your kid is at an age where they're like when they're conscious enough to have that self-awareness, right? You know, coherent answers, right? I think it's giving them a chance of self-agency is always good, right? So I think it's a good thing to ask. And it kind of opens up the question of like, is there anything you want to change yourself? But it's not like as direct. It like kind of lets them take the ball and kind of answer it how they will. And then you can kind of figure it out from there. We actually just did an interview with another parent about, they did a surgery on their child when she was like 3. And they did go through it, and we saw her. She seems to be doing well, and you know, it is a case by case situation. Like if it can be done in a kind of a hidden manner, then I think it's fine. But I'm not sure. But to answer your question, I do think it's good to ask that. I think it's okay to ask that question. Any opportunity to get the child self-agency is good. Lily, I think you wanted to answer.
I think objectively, no, I wouldn't want them to ask, but subjectively, yes. Basically, we know that the younger a child is, the better their surgical outcomes are with nevus removals, both psychologically and medically. If you get it earlier, it'll look better, and the kid probably won't even remember it. So I think if the parents think it's a good idea, you should get it done early. That was difficult with me because when I was born, they thought it would be done in 4 surgeries by the time I was 3. And of course, it ended up being 12, and I was 13. And that was a whole other thing, because when you're 13, you want your own body autonomy. And so it became a difficult situation because, of course, my parents said yes because they thought I was looking at melanoma if I didn't get it removed. And of course, now we know that's not true. But yeah, I wish there would have been a way to either have a better understanding of the risks of melanoma or to push it off a few years and let me give some say, just because as a kid, feeling like your body and the things that impact it aren't your own, I think can have some deep psychological implications, which can be difficult to resolve. But again, case by case basis, if you can just get it done in 1 surgery by the time they're 2, I think it can work well for a lot of people.
Yeah, no, great points you guys both bring up too. 2 different perspectives as well. Like I feel like that's kind of the beauty of this situation and of this question itself. Like the decision whether to go, like to give a choice of surgery or not to a kid is it's just going to be dependent on the situation and the person who's answering it. Having not had surgery from a young age, I remember my family talking to me about it, and I don't remember the conversation going very far. I remember vaguely they mentioned it to me as something that I could think about, but I just don't remember bringing it back up to them. And I think that was largely driven by the fact that, similar to Amann, I kind of self-identified with my nevus as I got older, but also that I wasn't rushed into it by necessity. I didn't. There was no urgent medical reason that I needed to tend to that would push me in that situation. Now, I can say as an adult, any situation where we can have autonomy, like I can objectively say, like now, if knowing what I know as an adult, I would love to have the choice as a kid. But the problem is we also have to understand that kids sometimes really don't know what's best for themselves. They can't possibly know it. They can't know all the context. In every situation that I've come across so far, talking with, well, not every situation, but most situations that I've talked to people about their nevus, whether they had surgery or not, what those impacts were. When the decision fell on the parent to make that choice, not only was it incredibly stressful, an emotionally charged situation, but like later in life, that kid eventually comes to the conclusion that their parents were generally doing the best they could with what they had. You know, like it's not a light decision by any means. I'm sure plenty of you parents, if you're online, or even us, know that our parents didn't take any decisions like that lightly. So there's no real, in my opinion, like correct way to answer this question. But what I will say is, for me personally, if I, here, bring it up again too, so I have it. My parents did bring it up, and I would have wanted them to ask me. But again, at the same time, if they had made that choice for me growing up, and they saw a particular area of my nevus that was like problematic potentially in the future, they had genuine concern about it, I think I would have found some way to handle that. I think I would have found some way to adjust to that. I'm quite grateful that my situation doesn't necessitate that I've needed surgery, and I've been able to, for the most part, elect whether I want it my entire life. But the reason this question is so difficult, I think, is because it's difficult to tell when you're giving a child autonomy versus whether you are trying to make the best medical decision for them and keep that in mind. Yeah, it's kind of a difficult one.
I think one important thing is, if you're considering surgery, to also talk to a dermatologist, because we see a lot of patients meeting with plastic surgeons, and a lot of times the plastic surgeons are going to push for surgery for some unknown reason. So I think it's important just to get different perspectives. I think we have a comment about someone concerned about scarring. Yeah, scarring will happen if you have a surgery, unfortunately. At least mine have been very tight, and they can be painful, which is a whole other part of surgery that you should think about. I think it's important to look, again, on a case-by-case basis and talk to the plastic surgeon. Like if you're doing expanders, there probably won't be as much scarring because expanders stretch out that extra skin and give the surgeons more room to remove skin. If you do serial excisions like I did, it's a little more difficult. Those are when you have several surgeries and remove little bits by bits. So then you're pulling the skin together each time and it will become tight. And then scarring also, you have to be thinking about whether that place gets sun exposure, because you don't want that with scarring. I think one thing we don't talk about a lot with scarring is some dermatologists who specialize in nevi don't encourage surgeries specifically because of scarring. If you have a scar, it's difficult to figure out if there's melanoma under that scar. So that's a whole other thing that you should talk to a dermatologist about, because if your nevus is there, it's really easy to see if it changes or if there's something that looks like melanoma, when if there's a scar, it's much more difficult. Matt, Amann, do you guys have any comments on scarring?
Um,
Sorry, I will say one thing. Like I said, my brother got a facial nevus removed, and he loves the scar, because girls think it's really cool how he just has like a little face scar. So they dig it. So people can have it. They can take it a lot of different ways with scars. Sorry to cut you off.
so I did a partial excision recently, to get rid of few this last year, like November. So, you know, I can speak from very recent experience. So I had some smaller satellites removed from like strategic locations. Well, actually, that was convenient because they were in strategic locations. So I had some removed from like by my nose and by my eyebrow, but they kind of had natural skin folds there. So in those situations, like the scars don't really show up. So if you happen to have something in those areas, you can be lucky, you know, from an elective perspective. And then I had some from my scalp. Those can create some minor bald spots if you do partial excision versus expanders, but you still will get some scarring because anytime you stitch something up, it'll be some scarring from wherever you are. So, you know, anything you do will have like risks that's not natural, right? So I guess it's kind of a cost benefit analysis. It's like how much worse is it to have the nevus versus the scar? And you know, it took me a week or a few days to a week to, you know, internalize the fact that I didn't have those nevus anymore and that I had scars instead. And I was just like, which was better? And at the moment, I wasn't quite sure, but I was still like healing and dealing with like a change in myself. Now that it's all over, I'm just like, yeah, that was awesome. Like I'm glad. But I'm in a very like fortunate situation, right? Like Lily's situation is very like different from mine. And, you know, like mine was smaller, elective. Hers was like unexpectedly longer and things of that nature. So like, you know, I can't speak about her half, and her and other people have had negative experiences. So it really just depends on the severity of the nevus. And but I will say that I think now there's like better practice and better understanding about how to go about it. So I have a positive perspective on it, but I think that like as it gets larger and larger and larger, I might not be so sure because I have a large chest nevus and I don't think I'd ever get that removed because I think in the end that might be too much. I think that would be worse over like I don't think we have a way to handle those larger nevus like Matt and mine and like Trump nevus. Yeah, Matt, do you have an additional response?
Yeah, well, at least specifically to scarring, I mean, I have scars from my nevus getting hit, but I've never had like surgical scars. So I think Lilly and Amann are the best resources for those. So I don't think I can add a ton of intelligent like background for that. But what I will say is if it's something you're genuinely concerned about, a useful tip could be also to find someone within our community that has a similar nevus as your child's or yours and kind of ask them about their situation. Like if they have a cape nevus, try to find a cape nevus owner that has some surgical scarring or has something associated with that, or a bathing truck nevus or so on. I'm afraid that like what I have to offer is quite general. And I think this is a situation where specific experience is going to be a lot more helpful in informing that decision.
People will do that where they like post a photo of their child or their own nevus on the Facebook group for Nevus Outreach and say like, I'm thinking about getting this removed. Has anyone done that? And I think that's a good way to get potential outcome photos to see what their scars ended up looking like to help inform your decision. Have any experience with nodules? I'll go first because mine's easy. I don't, just because the vast majority of my nevus was removed. I just have kind of like the lighter, thinner skin left. I don't know about you two.
Can we define nodules?
It's like the bumps.
Okay, so I definitely have a crap ton of those. I was pretty sure, but I wasn't sure if it was something more severe. Not any different. Mine for the most part have not like caused me like too much issue. Um, I think when we're talking about CMNs, generally speaking, it's like as long as medically speaking, as long as it's not like affecting the person, it's like you're probably fine. Socially speaking, that's when everything becomes subjective. And it's up to the person, conversation, pros, benefit, risk analysis. I'm kind of hand waving that because it is kind of case by case. But then, like Matt said, and Lily, you can find others, and that's the best way to find like the nearest model that had done something similar, right? That can help you guide that answer. I guess, yeah, medically speaking, nothing too much, and all my nodules are kind of like covered. I just doing a quick scan. Yeah, so I haven't had too many comments on those either.
As far as nodules are concerned on my skin, I don't think I have any. As I've gotten older, for the most part, I'm similarly no nodules. So I don't really have too much to add. And yeah, like Amann was saying, there are plenty in our community that actually do have nodules, and often, like Lily said, they can have like pictures of themselves posted in the Facebook group, and that is like honestly, those seem like some of the best way to get like solid information from people, because it pops up in everybody's feed, and from the most part, from what I've seen, is if someone has a similar nevus or a similar issue, at least in our community, they tend to be pretty responsible with stuff like that. It's kind of like a call to action. Hey, I need help with this, and people will respond. So I would say go down that route for specific information.
I think maybe just like the last few minutes, unless we get new questions, we'll just talk about Nevus Outreach, whether or how we think it could be beneficial for people to be involved, how it's been meaningful, things like that. Just because, at least for me, finding Nevus Outreach and being involved was huge. I found them through Facebook, like a lot of people, and joined a Zoom happy hour during the pandemic, and I met Matt on there, and I think it was just really great finally seeing someone who looked like me for the first time in my life, just because that probably has a lot of psychological impacts on anybody. So I would say it's been life-changing, and that's why I still volunteer, just to not only do you keep amazing relationships with people because you share something that you share with very few people in this earth, but also I think we all just want to give back and help other people find this organization and help people get the answers that they need and all of that good stuff.
No, Matt, go ahead. I'll go.
No.
I insist.
Amann, I was gonna say, you already know where we're going with this. I was just gonna let you know to go first.
Anyway, I joined, I don't remember, it was 2006 or 2008. So for me, it was just kind of like, yay, more like I went somewhere. I didn't know. My dad said there was a convention about it. I just tagged along. I mean, I in my idea, I was like, oh yeah, I'm just going, right? And then there were kids my age, and I was like kind of cool. So I don't know how much like I internalized it as a kid, but I think like as I got older, it was like, it was nice to have that connection, right? So like as when you're younger, maybe the immediate exposure to other people having nevus is not as like impactful, like internally understanding how much impact it actually is to have like other people validate your experience by passively, right? Just like that other people like you out there. Because you're just kind of like existing as like, oh neat, they're like me, and then you go do kid things or teenage things or whatever, young preteen things. But then as we get older, we had like adult relationships. We're just like, wow, that's like really nice to have, especially in your vulnerable moments. So like for me, it's just having that connection with other people, knowing that there are other people like me, and then the people who are still growing up or like parents or whatnot, like I can provide value. So like for me, the organization is really a give and take, and it's just about community. So
my experience finding Nevus Outreach was, I didn't really, there was a moment when I really found it. My parents just got me involved at a very young age. So I feel like I'm grateful for this, but I also know there's a lot of privilege that comes with having been in Nevus Outreach for as long as I have. And one of the greatest privileges I have is that I have known since about the time that I was self-aware, that I have people around the world that look like me and that are going through similar issues, like similar things that I might be. And I can say unequivocally that has made all the difference in the way that I view myself, the way that I view the world. And I would say that's one of the reasons I volunteer still. When I was asked to be a part of the board, it was a difficult decision, but I wanted to find a way to continue the work that I had seen already been going on when I was a kid, and I wanted to find a place where I could have an impact in Nevus Outreach, because I felt so lucky to be given all this, this family essentially. So I kind of view the work I do now as a continuation of that and giving back. And I am currently the awareness committee chair, and that's the work that Lilly and Amann and I do is geared toward getting folks like us more involved and helping make the general public more aware of who we are, and getting everybody in our organization a bit more comfortable sharing their stories. I think it's really impactful work. I love doing it. It's stressful at times, but it's incredibly rewarding. So I will say, little plug here, if there is anybody on the call that is interested in getting involved, please do so. We need all the help we can get. And if you have a child that is involved in Nevus Outreach in some way, they're a kid that has regularly attended conferences, or they'll be attending one in the future, we can of course talk about that when we see you in person. But I'd say it's, of my time in Nevus Outreach, I would say the post involvement, specifically like doing events as a kid era, and moving into the intentionally giving back and later night hours doing work on the side and attending board meetings and so on, that has been the majority of the value I find in my Nevus Outreach experience nowadays, is doing the volunteer work and giving back. Just like with anything, if you find you're really well connected in an organization or a bunch of among community, the desire to give back just kind of comes out of you. And I think we kind of are all at that point. I think, and we all have, Amann, Lilly, and I have various varying lengths of involvement with Nevus Outreach, but I think we can all truly say that we really like doing this. It's really important to us, and we want to give everybody this, every kid that is growing up with a Nevus, the same sense of family that this organization has done for us. That's why we do it. I'm trying to think of anything else we might want to mention. What connection or experience through Nevus Outreach has been the most meaningful to you? We've already answered that. Anything you guys can think of? Any other closing comments or one last question you want to answer?
I'm glad you guys all found Nevus Outreach. I'm glad you're involved, and I'm glad you parents are trying to learn as much as you can, because it'll only help your kid in the future. And I think if you're able to come to a conference, I think we'd all really recommend that. Just being in a room with people who look like you for the first time is indescribable.
To echo that, go ahead, Amann.
Yeah, the conferences are great. It's a really good time to be vulnerable and just feel connected with other people. I think that's a great gift that we don't get to have too often, either because we're too busy, because it's usually like that sense of existence could be associated with other things like sports or whatever. But when you come to the conferences, it's really just about you as a person. There's a little bit about the Nevus, but it's really just like connecting about experiences. And that's like the whole point. There's not much extra. And so I think that's like, a rare situation that, is present like as an option. So if you have the ability to do that, then it's, come join us.
Amann, great segue with rare. I think that was intentional. In case no one else on the call knows, in 2 days' time, it will be Rare Disease Day. The whole reason we are doing things like this, Q&A and stuff like that, is because we are building up toward the day, one of the most rare days of the year, where we all get to celebrate and share stories about what a Nevus is, what CMN is, what NCM is, and why it's important. So just encourage you all to continue being involved. Look for stuff in the next couple of days. If you see anything that you want to share, please do so. And just overall closing comments. Thank you guys very much for joining us. This is a great experience for us as well as we get older. I think we can all say that the conferences are incredibly impactful as we've grown, and it is an incredibly rare experience. And we want to share that with as many people as possible. So again, thank you all for your time. Happy Rare Disease Month. Rare Disease Day is in 2 days' time. Looking forward to celebrating with you all.
And our emails are on the screen, assuming I shared correctly. If you do have any questions, feel free to reach out to any of us.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks, Lily. Thanks, Amann.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Thanks everyone for joining.
Yeah.
Do I stop recording?